inside the Hockey Hub. Happy Monday. Happy sunny Monday. It obviously depends where you're watching, but Boston's looking beautiful this week. Sophia and Kasey back with you. Kasey, you and I have a jam-packed show as usual. I always say like the dog days of summer. I'm at the beginning over the weekend. I'm like, what are we going to talk about? And then articles are coming out, assessments, news, all this stuff is going on. So as we get closer to the NHL season starting, training camp and Bruins season, we're going to be talking about a lot of things Bruins. And we have one of my favorite guests we've had on so far. Thanks to you, I got to meet Nate Thompson. He is awesome, and he's going to be joining us on the back half of the show, guys. So right now, Kasey and I are going to kind of take it away, but Nate's going to be on later on in the show, and we're going to go over some of his thoughts on some of the Bruins assessment that we've been kind of like reading about heading in to training camp. But first, since we're not rushing to get to a guest, Kasey, how the hell are you? How was your weekend? I know you just wrapped up. Boston has entered the chat. So how have things been going for you since that Red Sox broadcast?
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, it was still pretty hectic of a week, but you know how it is. You just roll into the next assignment. But it was good because I actually had Friday off and I went into complete hibernation, enjoyed the good weather, had to do some DMV stuff because I'm still getting situated here in Boston, but overall, like really good. It was a nice down weekend for the most part. A lot of FaceTimes back home. There was a lot of things going on that I didn't get to make it back for, but I was still there in spirit, which was nice. So I got to catch up on some Z's. How about you?
Okay, a complete opposite boat. I have 0 Z's in me. I need some Z's right now, but all for good reason. I've never gone away. So I've been in Boston since 2019 and never got to check out Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket. I've seen a bit of Maine, seen a bit of New Hampshire. It's just most of the time for the summer, as you know, I'm like driving back and forth from Toronto to be with my family. So then I spend the summers kind of there. But I went to Nantucket and it was awesome. Like the weather was great. You could probably hear it in my voice, right? That I maybe stayed up.
It lived up to the hype because my mom and I were supposed to make it out to Nantucket in June, but I told everyone here, I was like, she answered a business call that morning, and when my mom starts on business calls, you can't take her out in public, but like I'm still dying to get out there. It feels like you have to plan accordingly to make it happen.
Yes, you definitely do. You can't be booking like last minute. I think one of my girlfriends booked this house almost 8 months before we went. So yeah, you got to plan accordingly, but it is absolutely worth the hype. Bring your mom. Bring your mom.
I will. The clan's all coming back up in September. So even though it's end of summer, I love a good sweater in the beach moment at any time. Even though it's hot in Florida, we still try to make it a thing at some point in January. So it'll be better suited here. That's for sure.
Wait, I just realized in talking to you, and then we'll get to hockey stuff, I promise everyone, but I just realized in talking to you being from Tampa, we had 3 people fly up from Tampa for this, like old friends of my friends. They live in Tampa now, and they flew up for it, and they said it's the weekend of the year. So there's that. Ooh. How's that for a sales pitch?
There you go. More Tampa. Well, I would be the new Tampa friend, I guess, to the pile of everything, but they're a good time. I will say. Yeah. We know.
We had a lot of fun, and I can save that for off-air coffee chats with you. But yeah, let's get to, as I said at the start of the show, it's summer. It's kind of like, okay, what are we really talking about? But there's PTO stuff that's really interesting to me. But first, let's start with just something the NHL put out. Rating and David Pastrnak getting the number 2 spot in terms of wingers around the NHL. Nikita Kucherov getting number 1. I don't think we're going to go through all 20. Like we're going to focus in on Pasta, but I love that we have you to be able to talk about Kucherov and everything like that. I can't disagree with the 1 and 2. Pasta would be number 1 if it wasn't for Kucherov, but I absolutely can't disagree with that. Do you want to lead us off on maybe Kucherov, and then we can get into Pasta since you know him well?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, definitely no surprise when it comes to Kucherov. We've seen the fact that he's kind of gone on a bit of a tear since he realized that he can stay on the healthier side. Because a few years ago, there was a number of dooming points throughout the season where Kucherov wasn't involved and in the mix. So he completely commands the top line for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And you kind of have to get that trust nod from him to play up top. Another guy that made the list, Brandon Hagel, got that trust nod from him. And we saw some pretty spectacular play out of the pair of them. But what makes him such an imperative player in the NHL as a whole is just he's a magician when the puck is on his stick. He can work in tight spaces. He sees lanes that really don't feel like they exist a number of times. And we kind of talked about it with Blumel a little bit here on the Hockey Hub a couple weeks ago, Sophia, the fact that like when you have a lefty right winger, it's going to open some things up in a different way and make it really hard to defend. So we know he's really good at finding angles as well as those lanes. And you don't get up in the 100 pluses and you don't find the numbers and the points that Nikita Kucherov does so consistently without being top of the charts. And I think number one is just so fitting for him. And I feel like he can play with a number of guys, even though he's so picky about who gets the nod to be on the top line with him.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, I think it was 121 last season. Really hard to argue with that, even though that's not the only factor that when the NHL put out this list that they considered, points isn't the only factor, but that's just a hard one to argue with when you're consistently putting up that many points. I know you said had a bit of a down slump at some point, but yeah, that was definitely number one. And, you know, as a Bruins fan, as a Bruins reporter, I love when David Pastrnak makes like the top 5 highlights of the night, and you know you see some of his moves and it's cerebral and he's going through guys. But Kucherov sometimes, like, I do a triple take. Like, I got to watch that 3 or 4 times in a row, and like you said, finds lanes, makes space, just gets through guys, and smooth. Like, it's just smooth. Like, it looks effortless. It's not. It looks effortless, but I don't. We're going to make an argument for fans watching why Pasta maybe could have gotten number one, and we could talk about that, but I don't think many fans are like, this is ridiculous. Like, yeah, he's just that good, Kucherov.
Oh my gosh, he is. And I think why he deserves a little bit more of a notch is I know last season at some point, a number of us reporting wise and interview wise were like, holy shit, like Kucherov's starting to play a little bit more defense, and it's not particularly something that a winger has to have in their repertoire, that's for sure, but seeing that there's more wingers that can kind of be a little bit more defensively stout, it makes them jump off the pages a bit more. And so postseason is one different conversation, but as for the points and the fact that he has added a little bit more defensive abilities to his play, I mean, it makes sense for him to be able to get up there. And I feel like that's why a few other wingers kind of snuck into the top 20, not just because of their electricity with picking up points, but their ability to kind of add defensively also.
Kasey, no shame at all in if you like can't recall or don't, know the answer, because I want to just ask you about turnovers at the blue line with Kucherov, because Pasta gets criticized with that a little bit. He coughs off the puck at the blue line or bounces over his stick. But then, the counter argument is like, if you're going to be that good and you always have possession of the puck, it's going to happen to you more than other people. Does Kucherov kind of have that? Like, is there a little criticism with that, or is he really, really clean with the puck and limits his turnovers?
No, there's been some moments where it's just like big plays have come off of turnovers from him. But I mean, you said it, like usually when you look at the totality of guys that have like the most takeaways, they also have the most giveaways in equal measure because of how much they're carrying the puck. So it's just been kind of one of those moments where, like, I know a couple years ago it was like, okay, Nikita Kucherov against a lot of physicality, there's going to be big turnovers. And, at some points you can count the teams that you're going against that were going to be so physical that you were concerned about him getting muscled out of position and stuff. But I will say that's something that got cleaned up a little bit more when it became so heavily relied on his health and him being involved in games. And he talks like he learned so much from Steven Stamkos. Like, he really relied on having conversations and guidance from him, and I think Stammer kind of helped him clean it up a little bit, and he was able to kind of pick up and go toe-to-toe physical wise, and that's where I think the defensive element in his game started to come together a little bit more. But 3 seasons ago, actually a game versus Toronto in the postseason, it was just kind of like devastating to see some of the turnovers that were coming off of Kuch's stick.
Yeah. Pasta had a bit of criticism with that as well. And like we talked about it on the desk, if it happened during a game, or, we're going to break and then there's like a last minute goal before the end of the period and it's off of a Pasta turnover or whatever, we would obviously talk about it. But on that note, like you said, if you're going to have possession of the puck and just be as skilled as you are, then because we talk about this actually a little bit with the coaches. I'll bring Mason Lohrei into this really quick. It's about the fine line of creativity, freedom, like doing fantastic moves and then staying clean and staying disciplined. You just can't be max on one end and max on the other. It's impossible. It's like a painter. If you're going to be creative, you're going to be a little bit messy too, right? And that's Pasta's skill and how good he is, and you're making risky moves and going between the legs or something, because and when it works, it's like, oh my God, he's so good, that's fantastic. And then when he coughs it up and it leads to an opportunity or chance the other way, you're like, how could you do that? You can't have both. You'd like to see really skilled players improve on their defensive end and limit that, but if you're putting up 121 points, I guess it's okay.
Yeah, definitely okay. But you also make a really good point. Like, for a number of players, it's really hard to be creative and then be able to track back. So, I mean, there was a time, I want to say 2 seasons ago, or one of the players were talking about the fact that, like, Nikita Kucherov can get back, but then it's kind of getting in the proper position to make the defensive play. So being skilled on both sides is really a tall task, which is why we give so much highlights to, those outstanding centers out there that are in the mix. It's not a requirement for wingers, even though a number of them are starting to make it something that they want to be more impactful with, but you can't be creative and do it all sometimes. It feels like a large ask.
Listen, this isn't the Tampa Bay Lightning show, so I feel like we've been talking about Kucherov for a while, but all fair, because I guess that would mean why David Pastrnak didn't get number 1. So let's talk David Pastrnak in the number 2 spot. So many places to go here. We all know the season that the Bruins had, which was not great, and then the season that Pasta had stood out. Obviously, was still able to make it work for him, even though especially after the trade deadline and there were injuries and et cetera, he didn't have the best people to play with. And Elias Lindholm, who was supposed to really be the guy, admittedly, and injury, struggled. So Pasta really making it happen with fewer pieces. And the stat that stands out for me, which is maybe why we could argue, okay, Pasta should have got number 1, even though we both agree number 2 is great. 5-on-5 scoring, led the league in 5-on-5 scoring there, points and scoring. And again, didn't have the same pieces that the guys around him who followed that did. So David Pastrnak definitely deserving the number 2 spot. 3 consecutive 40-goal seasons, 100-point seasons, in really good company there in terms of Boston Bruins history. Hard not to say he deserved number 2.
Oh my gosh, I'd agree. Well, I think a large thing too, because we've talked about Morgan Geekie quite a bit on this show, especially ever since his contract extension, but you find that David Pastrnak has the ability to kind of level up the guys around him. Like, sometimes it takes a minute to find that rhythm, but I think we were all in awe just like how well the connections were adding up between him and Geekie. And I think that you mentioned it, like, he's a complete player. So it's not just your guy that you go to and you're like, okay, we're going to grab some power play goals from him, and that's about it. Like, he can really pull through in any moment. What I really liked was the fact that, like, this is a team that had its struggles, but he was second in the league for getting shots on goal. And I remember Vasi did an article with NHL.com, and Vasi was kind of talking about how many players don't waste shots anymore, and how in some contests you don't really see as many pucks getting pushed forward at you. And that's why some goalies are kind of getting a little stale in between the pipes and then have to come up with these big plays. And then you got a guy like Pastrnak who can just consistently apply the pressure over and over and over again. So to think that he's kind of like the exception now in the NHL, and to be able to get so many pucks on net in a system where it could be a little bit slowing down, or players are trying to be overly decisive, that's what you want to see. This is why fans sit in the stands and scream shoot, and you don't have to worry about that with a guy who skates as well and is a playmaker just like David Pastrnak is. So I think that's why he's in second, but can make a conversation and argument for that close first.
Yeah, no, 100%. And you mentioned the power play, which obviously really struggled for the Boston Bruins. And I know you're just kind of joining this Boston area. And I was 6 years ago, and I can promise you, especially after covering Toronto, who's doing great now. But when I was covering the team, they were really struggling. It was just such a night and day experience watching the power play, especially live. It's so fun when special teams are good. And watching it live, there was a time when the Bruins would get the man advantage, and you're like, even though it wasn't 100%, no one clicks at 100%, it felt like it. I was like, oh, they're going to score. It really was a man advantage. And the possession of the puck, it was fast passing, everything. It was so good. And David Pastrnak was a huge reason for that. And this past season, they had the man advantage, and you felt zero confidence. You were like, oh my God, I hope they even get a couple shots on net, or 1 or 2, please. And so imagine if when the power play improves for David Pastrnak, or if it was even better last season, where he'd be at. So there's that factor. There's the guys he couldn't play with. And the best players in the world, you mentioned Steven Stamkos, he has his office where he scores from on the power play and still is able to do it. Ovechkin, we know that, and other teams know that, but the best players are able to get around that. And Pasta got stifled a little bit with that shot, so I know they're going to be planning on moving him around a little bit, or just making it less predictable and getting him open. So I'm excited to see kind of what that looks like, because you can argue maybe with the power play being so bad, he probably left 10 goals off the board this season.
Oh my gosh, definitely that and then some. And I think what's going to be something to look forward to is just kind of what those units tend to look like moving in to the upcoming season. Because, I mean, you talk about Pasta's speed for one, but you've got to have players that are going to be able to kind of match his pace and get up there so that he can be on either end of making a play happen, whether it's opening up the lanes or him going for the goal himself. And I feel like that's where fans were most concerned. But he's the best of the best for a reason, and I feel like it's going to be more than Morgan Geekie that we're talking about at the end of the season, being a player that he helps kind of level up as they figure out what the identity is moving forward.
And even some of the, we talk about Charlie McAvoy and Hampus Lindholm being injured. Again, before you came here, but the overtime game-winning goal against the Toronto Maple Leafs in Game 7 in the playoffs a couple of seasons ago, that was from Hampus. Up the pass up the ice was from Hampus. Pasta picks it up as he banks it off the boards. Like, that's going to help too. We have forwards, you got your centerman, you got your other wingers passing to you, you got Morgan Geekie, but having, which is why they want and got Hampus Lindholm, this puck mover, this offensive defenseman, being able to read his guy, and Charlie McAvoy as well, we hope, and make plays. That's going to also bolster that. In talking about this, I am pumped. There are so many question marks that fine could go the other way. Will Hampus be where he needs to be? Will Elias be where he needs to be? But the answer is I'm going with yes for now. We're going with the yes. How can it be worse? It's going to get better. And I'm just really pumped, not to mention some of the youth. We don't know about Patra, Minton, and what they're going to look like. Some of the youth that could be injected into the lineup that have some creativity. I'm getting really excited about just, I know the season is going to be better. And even if it's not better points wise, even if you're leaving points off the table, which you don't want, but the improvement in terms of chemistry and development for long term is going to be better. I don't care what people say. Fine, maybe they're not making the Stanley Cup final this year, but or maybe not even the postseason, maybe. But if we're talking about the pieces now and development within and getting guys better, this is just making me really excited.
Oh my gosh, I think that it's so accurate to feel that way. We had somebody call in the WEI when I hopped on with Travis the other weekend, and he was like, we're going to be the new Blackhawks. And I was just like, that's a bit of that's way off the page to go and try to assess this team. There were some battles that this team should have been better at coming out on top with. And then on top of it, letting up in the third period was a huge Achilles for this team last year. So there's just some small things that they have to be better with, and they bolstered defensively. So that means that you can hopefully make it through 3 periods without giving up any sort of leads, do better with protecting your leads. So I feel like they can at least collect a handful plus more wins this year, and I don't think they're going to be as bad as the Blackhawks. So I would say that I'm excited, and we already know that there's a number of players that I'm high up on and think will take that next step coming up. We know how I feel about Zadorov. We know how I feel about Janot. We know how I feel about Mitten, and then we'll see what the competition ends up playing with the right wing on the third line.
Yeah, I disagree with the Blackhawks, but fair argument, for that fan, whatever, no problem. I disagree with the Blackhawks analogy and analysis. I guess there are definite similarities, but I do feel like the Blackhawks were kind of this was retool, actually rebuilding around Bedard. Taves is gone, Kane gone, and I know Marchand's gone and Bergeron's gone and all that. I know that, but I just feel like it's a different rebuild, a way longer patience, and then maybe they're going to be a 3-peat or a 2-peat cup contender down the line. That's what they're going for. The Bruins a little bit more immediate. It wasn't a complete crazy. I mean, it's a pretty big turnover now that I'm thinking about it, but it's still some really key pieces like Pasta, McAvoy, Swayman, Stake, and you're not letting them not make the postseason for 5 years or whatever just to get better. So disagree.
A respectful disagree.
Kasey, listen, we got to send it to break. Guys, if you want to check out the article, it's NHL.com. We're not going to go through all top 20, but David Pastrnak making it in the number 2 spot. And it looks like Kasey and I agree that's where he should be, because Nikita Kucherov just earning that number 1. All right, on the other side, PTOs, professional tryout opportunity, or opportunities. Anyway, tryout contracts. We're going to be talking about that on the other side and who the Bruins might or maybe should invite to training camp to see if they can crack the roster. So we'll discuss that. And then Nate Thompson joins us a little bit later in the show. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to the Hockey Hub. I just wanted to make you guys aware that if you wanted to wear some of the podcasts, the Bruins, NESN has a ton of different podcasts, and we now have merch and swag. So you guys can go to Wicked Wearables, NESN at Wicked or NESNWickedWearables.com. Oh my God, hopefully I'm going to get this right. This is brought to you by, in partnership with Breaking Tea. We've got a Hockey Hub one, bunch of other ones. So if you guys want to check that out, please do. Kasey and I continuing our conversation about the top-rated wingers that the NHL, an article that they just put out. We're going to talk about professional tryout contracts in a second. But I guess, did we want to get into our top 5 positions? And are we doing Bruins, Kasey, like with the Bruins or around the league? Because I'm going to go Bruins-centric.
You can go Bruins. I'll go league.
Okay, why don't you go league and I'll do Bruins. Why don't you kick us off?
All right, should we continue with the wingers? Let's see. For my top 5, of course, Nikita Kucherov, David Pastrnak, Brandon Hagel, who all made the top 20 list. If anyone does not know, Brandon Hagel is going to be the entire face and identity of the NHL in the next couple of years. I'm such a fan of his, not just from covering him closely, but after he got traded to Tampa Bay from the Blackhawks, he didn't really jump off the page, and then they headed into the postseason and had this crazy run versus Toronto. Nick Paul kind of popped off more than he did. But the following year, he ended up leading the NHL in takeaways, and he just has such an aggression to his game, which I absolutely love to see. Like I said, most wingers, they don't have to have this defensive element naturally, and he just kind of does so well at playing on both ends of the ice and being such an asset. So love Brandon Hagel, and he got the tap from Nikita Kucherov to play top line. Matt Boldy, talk about playmakers. I was obsessed with this guy for the past year, and then heading into Four Nations, it was just like the main guy that I could talk about in almost any conversation. And then Four Nations, I feel like he was outstanding as well. One of the top guys when it comes to forechecking, but I think that his playmaking ability just doesn't get enough bragging rights on it, and the fact that he can be extremely physical and just has such a vision out there. I love watching Matt Boldy play. It's the only reason why I probably tune into Minnesota games when I can, and then you can't have a wingers list without Alex Ovechkin, so that's my top across the league.
Okay, girl, I prepped completely differently for this. I thought we were my bad. I thought we were I was going to pick just top in each position for me with the Boston Bruins. So that's what my list is.
One of each? Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. You know what? That's my list. Obviously, I'm going David Pastrnak for wingers, but when Brad Marchand was with the team, that would be a hard one for me. I think I would have gone with Marshy only. It's so hard. Their personalities both of them are so big and so different, right? You don't see Pasta mixing it up in scrums or being the agitator.
He apologized to the ref that one postseason.
Yeah, exactly. Very, very different. Both hilarious as hell in different ways, and both really great character guys, guys that you want on your team. We know this now about Marchand. So it would have been tough for me to pick between the two of them, but since Pasta's on the team, Pasta. And then if we're going goalies, this is, I didn't even know if we were doing in the past, but I'm just going with current, but we're just hoping Jeremy Swayman has a better in the season that he was gonna have or supposed to have with this big contract. So I'm really excited, and I don't know if we've talked about it enough on this show, but I do have a lot of faith in his head game, because we know that being a goaltender is definitely a mental battle, and you could talk to any goalie about that. And I have a lot of faith in Jeremy's dedication and being able to rebound from that, and then kind of what he is doing for that, and also the responsibility that he feels to this franchise and to this fan base. I definitely feel and let's just not forget, I don't know why I'm popping off on a tangent, but I'm going to. Let's just not forget his age too. And maybe because I spent the weekend with friends, we were talking a lot about Bruins. And so they're asking me my opinion. I was really debating the Jeremy Swayman stuff. Let's just not forget his age and how much pressure, Kasey, we're both in our 30s. When 10 years ago, how would you have handled, ultimate pressure and not performing to how you should. And then like imagine you're having a public contract negotiation with Nesson, and then everyone's like, you're overpaid and you're 24/5 and everyone's tweeting that you suck. Like, how would you handle
and
that?
missing training camp, there was just so many factors to it that I don't think you can oversimplify the mental that probably like he had to go through coming into the season.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, maybe we'll save my Swayman rant for another time. I really want to get into the professional tryout stuff, and Nate Thompson is coming up. So let's pivot from this really quick, go to the professional tryout news or some of the articles that came out around the Boston Bruins of who they should potentially invite to camp. And I looked this up because I was like, is there a limit to people you can invite? And there is not. So obviously throughout training camp, you got to be narrowing down your roster, but there isn't. So they can invite 100 people if they had the space. That's not what we're talking about here, but I'm going to name off some of the guys on the list. Robbie Fabry, center left winger, Grizz, left shot D, Evgeny Kuznetsov, center right winger, Victor Olofsson, left wing, right wing, and Jan Ruta was the list. Just because I'm familiar with him, I'm just going to give my thoughts on Matt Grzelcyk. Career high, and this is a very quiet career high. Maybe because I was off most of the season, I missed this, but career high in points with 40. His previous career high was 26, so not quite double, but over 10 points more. Very quietly, 1 goal, 39 assists, nothing, that's for sure, and still hasn't signed anywhere. So that's a bit surprising to me. And sure, he's not a youthful player with that for the next 10 years you might want him, but a couple-year contract, why not? Had his experience with the Boston Bruins. Maybe weird to be invited back, but I don't hate it, especially after last year's performance. Any thoughts on Grizzy? I don't know how familiar you are with him.
I feel like with some of the frustrations that fans had, they want to see a little bit more point production and contribution. And I don't know where the depth particularly needs to be with this defensive core, especially with health gaining on their side. I know a name that jumped off to me is Olofsson. Victor Olofsson just came from Vegas Golden Knights. I liked his play, especially on the road. Some of the moments that Vegas just kind of got really stale through the periods. This was a guy that kind of pulled through for them pretty consistently. Power play is where he does have a lot of consistency. So I feel like that would help fans breathe a little easier to be like, all right, you got a 20-plus goal scorer that can contribute on the power play as well. And someone who's not going to have that center to their name. I want somebody who is really authentic to that left wing, right wing position to come in and contribute. And I think that bringing a guy in for PTOs and adding competition to the winger position, we've talked about so many guys that could potentially be competing for the right wing on the third line. Not that Olofsson is really a third-line guy, but I think that he'd kind of really ramp things up competitively and make a case to join. I mean, he's had a number of seasons with 20-plus goals, and I think the right system will help him get right back to that. And you're talking about another guy who is a really good skater that can help push things along for this team. So that's a name that jumped up to me when you're looking at PTO opportunities. I just want an authentic winger to probably get into the mix.
No, absolutely. And if you were to crack the roster, like everything you mentioned, that would be so helpful, and points production similar or better is not going to be bad at all. So I do like that. I like that internal competition factor. I do think we are going to see some of these guys invited to camps around the league. So we'll have to see, I guess they pick and choose, right? Where they want the opportunity or wherever they're invited. If more than one team invites them, then they have to pick. But yeah, no, I mean, with the Bruins had Danton Heinen, who also went to Pittsburgh, which is kind of crazy, but he played for them for a couple seasons, then played in Pittsburgh, had some pretty breakout years, didn't get offered a contract, and then came back 2 seasons ago on a PTO, and then cracked the team, and then ended up actually being pretty impactful. So, it will depend on, does this person love the city? Do they want to come back? If we're talking about Grizz or Victor Olofsson and what kind of a hockey market. The good news is for the Boston Bruins, it's one of the best hockey markets in the league. So it's not hard to convince players to be like, hey, do you want to come skate with us and check it out? And for a player, do you think the status of where the Bruins are at, as we keep calling it, a retool, is that a turnoff, or is that more like, hey, this is an opportunity for me?
I think depending on, the player and age, I think it's an opportunity, honestly, because, look at all the places that Marco Sturm has been in the offseason, having a conversation about expectation and implementation, and it makes you excited to play for the coach. I think as things are kind of moving along with the NHL landscape kind of changing and modernizing, like it's really about who you play for. So I feel like you want to just know that there's hope, but some guys need to revitalize their career, and that's all about the right system. So I wouldn't be surprised that it's now become a little bit more attractive. If you're not looking to win in the next 3 years, then yeah, come here, reestablish your career, play for a great coach, because I feel like this is just the beginning for Marco Sturm. And our guest that we're going to have back on, Nate Thompson, spoke to that so perfectly when we first had him on, and you've heard it all throughout. I mean, spitting chicklets when he was on there, he said some great things. It just makes you want to rally behind him. So I'd say it's an attractive place to play.
I agree, and a great city. You're on the ocean, amongst other things. So, all right, but speaking of Nate, by the way, he's waiting. He's waiting in the background. We got to send it to break. So we are going to stop talking. We're going to bring him back on, discuss all things Bruin, and go a little Bruins, go league-wide with him. We'll be right back after this, and Nate Thompson is joining us. Welcome back to the Hockey Hub, Sophia, Kasey, and you know what? I'll just go out and say it. I'm not kissing your ass, Nate, but my favorite guest we've had on the show, Nate Thompson, joining us again. Thank you for being on again.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
I feel like we should get a plaque that jumps at the bottom of the screen. Favorite guest.
I am honored. I am honored. Thank you for putting that logo underneath.
Pressure. No, I'm kidding.
Pressure. Yeah, the pressure.
Listen,
You're welcome.
I do say this to every guest, but no, I'm just kidding. No, you were so honest and candid with your answers, and we're going to have you on to talk Bruins because that's where we try to go, obviously, with this podcast, but we're going to go a little league-wide. Nate joining us from California, so woke up early to be on. So again, thanks again. Nate, we've been all over the place in terms of what the Bruins could be, couldn't be, what's going on. We had Jay Leach, who was also an excellent guest, one of the assistant coaches for the Boston Bruins on last week, and he gave us a lot of insight to the vibes around this team, vibes in the locker room last year, vibes around certain guys. One of the guys he talked about was Nikita Zadorov. So I want you to kind of hear that answer, and then we'll kind of talk about Big Z. Let's hear from Jay Leach last week on the pod.
Z is he's a character. He's you know what, and every team needs someone like that. He's not afraid to get in your face. He's very willing to stick up for his teammates. Something that is invaluable on any team. Excuse me, like my door is opening. He's, I think he, along with some of our other guys, played a huge role for us last year in trying to make up for what we had lost with Charlie and Hampus. Because of that experience, I think he's hopefully suited to play some of those top end minutes that we've talked about. And so I know he's having a good summer. We've talked a couple times and to work on some certain things. But his ability is certainly top four level. I think along with Charlie and Hampus, Z will be able to kind of raise his level as well, and bring those intangibles that you're talking about when it comes to Z, with that little personality and a little bit of bite. That's certainly something that we welcome.
So a little more context to add to that, as I was telling him how I prefer a blunt delivery. Actually, Sophia and I were talking about how we prefer leadership styles. And this locker room likely going into the season with just 2As on the roster, no captain, but a guy like Zadorov. I mean, not only is he blunt, but we've heard Mason Lohrei talk about how direct he is when he's helping guys kind of find different skill sets and stuff. What's so important about having different kinds of voices in a locker room? Because I feel like Pastrnak and McAvoy, they're going to be trying to find their leadership voices, but I think Zadorov already has it.
Well, first I have to say Jay Leach, former teammate and roommate of mine. We lived together, so it was good to see him. But
would he call you a good roommate?
He would call me a good roommate. He would.
Okay.
He would. We played together in Providence a long time ago. But anyways, Zadorov, from his interviews, you can see him, right? You're right. He's very candid. He says what's on his mind. There's no filter. And I play with a lot of guys like that. And you need guys like that. There's a guy like that in the LA Kings with Drew Doughty. no filter, says what's on his mind. And you need guys like that. You need guys that are not going to sugarcoat things. And I like what Jay said, because he mentioned Hampus Lindholm and Charlie McAvoy, being out for a period of time last season. And I think that, unfairly, I think Zadorov, I think, was leaned on probably too much. I think he is a complimentary top 4 defenseman, and no question, like Jay said, he is a top 4. And I think that, people have to realize too, when a guy goes to a new team, sometimes it takes time. It's not going to click right away. Sometimes it could take a year. Sometimes it can take a couple of years before really things start to click. So I do believe that, Nikita Zadorov is going to be that guy that the Bruins want him to be, the guy that they signed him to be. And I really agree with Leachy, though, because I think that point of those other D being injured, him being leaned on, maybe, unfairly too much. And now being able to play with one of those two guys, with Hampus Lindholm, probably Charlie McAvoy, he's just going to compliment them. And, his ability, his size, you can't teach size. And he's obviously a big man, and he can skate, he can move, he's mean, he does a lot of different things. So I expect the Bruins to be happy with Nikita Zadorov this year.
I love that you said things take time, because they do. Nate, I don't know if you know, but I missed most of the season last year for personal reasons. So I kind of came back right after trade deadline. And so I wasn't really around the room, right? I didn't know what to expect. And when I came in and I met Zadorov for the first time in a scrum and whatever, I was like, oh, well, like, it was just not what I was used to room wise. There was a quiet leadership with Char, and I'm not going to say I know that he was quiet in the room. I know he did his thing, but I'm saying outwardly there wasn't this like brashness to media. And at first I was like, oh, like I don't know how this is going to fit in here. And I feel like as the end of the year went on, it was just so important to have, because of what happened in trade deadline, because where the team was going, and they kind of like fell off a cliff. And he was like really protective. And I was like, you know what, this is actually needed with this stretch, with where the Boston Bruins are at in terms of retooling, blah, blah, blah. This is needed, number one. And number two, when you are in such a market and might be struggling, the media's, you know what it's like. They're going to come for you. And he is not afraid to put people in their place and say, no, that's wrong. That's incorrect. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't say this about our room. And that can take that off of Pasta's plate or McAvoy's plate. They are going to do that as well, but he can kind of defend the room to the media, because he doesn't care. And he's going to want to do that. And I think that's actually way more helpful than people realize.
Oh, absolutely. I think having a guy like that, and you said it, a guy like Pasta, Charlie McAvoy, all these guys that are big names that have been around a long time, Jeremy Swayman, these guys that the media, quote unquote media, is going to, be on no matter what, right? So I think having a guy like Nikita Zadorov to be in the locker room, to be that buffer for those guys, to say whatever, I'll say it, I don't care. You guys are going to say what you're going to say. I'll take the heat, no big deal. But I think having a guy like that, and it's funny, I've talked to guys that have played with him. I played with Max Domi in Montreal, and he played with, Zadorov and Jr., and said he was the best teammate, the guy that would just go to bat for you no matter what. And you see that, like you said, in the scrums, on the ice. So I think that, everyone was questioning the signing after a year, and it hasn't been a fit, but like I said, it takes time. I do believe that Zadorov will fit in. He's going to be a good fit for them. And, he's going to flourish. I do believe that he's going to flourish once he gets to play with Charlie McAvoy and a guy like Hampus Lindholm.
Yeah. I love that we're talking about probably expectations from his first year into what's going to come about. I do want to pick your brain about somebody else that I feel like caught a little too much heat, and that's going to be Elias Lindholm. You saw some sparks of like original Elias Lindholm come to par towards the end of the season, but I know system and coaching and all these things come into play, but what's a realistic expectation when a player comes into a new system in a new city and wearing a new sweater as to where they can actually be impactful for hopefully 82 games?
Yeah, and that's a good question, because I've from experience, I've bounced around from a few different teams and had the experience of having to acclimate myself to a new team quickly. And a guy like Elias Lindholm, he's been counted on. He's been expected. He's a couple years ago, he was up for a Selke. He is a really good hockey player. And like I said, last year, there was a lot of changes for the Bruins, some turnover, some retooling, as we say. And I think the same thing, he comes to a new team. It takes time. It does. And I think also, which I haven't mentioned, bringing a guy or a head coach like Marco Sturm into the picture, is going to help a lot of these guys. He's been there. He's been on different teams. Marco Sturm, actually, he's pretty much experienced everything in his career. He's been a top line guy. He's been a bottom line guy. He's been traded. He's been gone through injuries. He's played a ton of games. I think having a guy like that around, especially a guy like Elias Lindholm, I think it's only going to help him. And I think that, the expectations of Elias Lindholm obviously are high. When you're up for a Selke a couple years before, they're going to be like that. But I do think that, he's a guy that, the Bruins need. They need him to play well because of his skill set, his 200-foot game, everything he brings to the team. So the Bruins are going to need him this year.
Yeah, no, and like you said, it takes a while to get acclimated. He talked about his injury earlier, as well as just moving to a new city and the whole thing. Like, you're not alone; you're with your family, with your kids. Like, this isn't this. There deserves to be a grace period. And yes, you see some guys just come in and mesh immediately, but it's no secret now that this room wasn't the room that it was in previous years. Because of training camp and how it went down. Jim Montgomery got fired, Jeremy Swayman's contract, all that kind of stuff. So I have nothing but high expectations in the best way. I don't mean pressure way, but I just feel like they're going to be contributing in the ways that were expected of them and they expected of themselves last year in the next coming years. And, that's all good. I want to move it on to roster positions and this thing called internal competition and kind of ask you about that, what that feels like. But Nate, we do have to send it to break. So I'm giving you time to think about it for break. Okay. And then when we come back, we'll pick up the conversation. Guys, Nate Thompson isn't going anywhere. We're going to be right back after this quick break. All right, we're back at the Hockey Hub. Sophia, Kasey, and Nate Thompson joining us again, talking all things Bruins for now. Nate, I wanted to pick your brain about something that John Sweeney's been saying for ages, and that's internal competition with, the Providence Bruins guys getting chances and that your job's never safe, which might sound a little toxic, but also can be very healthy for a team. And this is just a very, very real story right now. Even the top six, usually with the Bruins in my 6 years, top six was pretty clear. And the top six now has a lot of question marks other than a couple of positions. And then bottom six, as usual, we see that in a lot of teams, a lot of movement. A lot of guys competing for jobs. So how real is that? Is that adds 10% competitive what's the word I'm looking for, competition, I guess, or 10% motivation, or is it way more impactful than that? Guys competing for jobs, roster positions not being clear, how much can that really help a team?
Oh, I think it helps the team immensely. I think having that healthy competition, guys wanting to compete for not even a roster spot, but maybe a spot in the top six. Maybe there's a guy that was playing on the third line last year that wants to be on the second line, or he has a chance to play on the first line. There's so many different auditions during training camp. And I think for these young guys, and obviously the new additions they made in the bottom six, it's going to push guys. It's going to push guys to be better. Guys like Tanner Jeannot and Sean Corrali, who's been there, they will be able to help some of these young guys. And I know from my experience, it's funny. I think back, and when I was, close to making the Bruins roster a couple times, I remember they brought in Glenn Metropolitan. Great guy. But obviously, it was kind of like writing on the wall. I kind of knew that he was stepping into that fourth line center role. And, maybe I was probably going to be the odd man out. And I learned that. And I learned a lot from Glenn Metropolitan. He helped me out along the way during training camp. So I think there's a lot of positives for the way Don Sweeney's doing this and creating this internal competition, because I think it will help develop these young guys too that are, right there for those roster spots. So I do believe that it's a positive thing, and it's only going to make them better too.
You mentioned Tanner Jeannot, so I need your help, Nate, especially if you want to remain our favorite guest. I need help making sure one of two things. I'm not being biased and I'm not being overly optimistic because I have a tendency to maybe do both. Who knows? Tanner Jeannot. I think that he has so much more to offer. I think that there's been a lot of heat on his name. I think that sometimes we just get so high on like, oh my gosh, he had a 24-goal season. He's got to do this forever and ever. And we're not taking system into play. I can vouch for covering him in Tampa Bay. It's really hard sometimes for bottom six players to play in front of a hybrid defense because the expectation on your role changes and you have to almost be more of a defensive player than contributing offensively. Then he goes out to LA and he's known to be this bruiser all around. But like, what can Bruins fans be excited about? Because I think he has a work ethic that isn't talked about enough if he's not putting up 20 goals in a season.
Well, Bruins fans can really be excited because these are the type of guys I believe that you need on every single team to win. And Tanner Jeannot is that guy. And you, like you said, everyone is from his first season and expectations and him having over 20 goals. And he does have some offensive ability. Do I think that he's going to score 20 goals again? I don't know. But could he get 10 to 15? Absolutely. He has that ability. We've seen it. And his truculence or his edge to his game is definitely going to fit in real well with the Bruins fans and everyone in Boston because this guy brings it. And I think having a guy like Tanner Jeannot in the lineup, I got to see him a lot last year with the Kings, and who else did is Marco Sturm. He obviously wasn't with the Kings, but with Ontario Reign, and got to watch this guy a lot and see him. So I think having that familiarity with him, seeing him day to day, watching him play games, knowing what he brings, and then obviously being around him a little bit, that it's just going to help. And I think, obviously everyone is attaching the contract and him, and I think that's the misconception. I do believe that Tanner Jeannot he's going to be a fit. He's going to be a fit. The Bruins don't have a guy like him. They didn't have a guy like him, and now they do. And I think that just adds an element to their team that's going to make them harder to play against.
I love that you bring up Marco Sturm again. We didn't want to bug you too much about him because the first time you were on the show, that kind of went Sturm heavy because of your experience with him. But I think the official statement, to the media and the public is that Marco Sturm didn't have a lot to do with bringing Tanner Jeannot, but I don't really buy that. I think like a coach, I just don't, like you said, if he has been able to watch him, and even like our insiders on NESN who aren't NHL players, like they have numbers to GMs, they have numbers to players, and they hear things about guys, that like, of course, a coach in the NHL that is a new coach building a roster is going to have some intel. So I do love that connection and how he might be able to bring out the best of him. I want to pivot really quick to Sean Kuraly, because you also brought him up. So there's a guy that was with the Bruins, then got to play for like where he grew up. Like he's had quite the great career in terms of playing for Original 16, then playing for Columbus. And now he's back with the Bees. But we had him on as a guest and talked to him about how now he's on the maturer side, how his role is going to evolve and how it's changed, A, growing up, and then B, coming back and kind of helping guide this team. I just wanted to ask you like how you transitioned in your career in and out of roles from like youth to then becoming a veteran, and what that was like for you, and if you enjoyed it, because Sean seems really excited about this opportunity.
Yeah, I did enjoy it, and it's funny. Like I think for Sean Kuraly, it's like a Sean Kuraly 2.0 version of him coming to the Boston Bruins. He was a young guy before, and kind of learning, and now he's coming back, and he's the older guy, and he's helping these young guys along the way. And I know for myself, in my experience, it was one of those things where you don't really, you're not really asked yet. It's just it kind of happens. You've been in the league for however long he's been in the league, almost a decade now, right? Or around a decade, and all of a sudden you come to a new team, and you're like, oh wow, I'm an older guy in this situation, and I got to help these guys out, and I got to talk to them, and it does. It's super enjoyable. It's fulfilling, and I think it is exciting because, almost like if you're like a player coach, you help these young guys out, you're helping them out in the game, whatever it is, and they start to get better. I know from my experience playing with, I got lucky enough to play with a guy like, Nick Suzuki in my time in Montreal when he was a young guy, and he was playing on the fourth line, which is hilarious. He's playing on the fourth line with me. And, playing with a guy like Nick Suzuki was obviously a little different. He's very skilled, very very high hockey IQ, but, being able to help him, mentor him was a great experience for me at the end of my career and just taught me a lot. So I think for a guy like Sean Kuraly coming into the Bruins, being leaned on as a leader, being looked upon to help these young guys, and they're going to need him too. I talk about Elias Lindholm, I talk about Zadorov. A guy like Sean Kuraly, Marco Sturm's going to lean on a guy like that a lot during the season.
Yeah, no, I'm really pumped to have Curls back with the guys, and as you mentioned, his evolution and kind of wanting your perspective on your evolution. Listen, Nate, we think, I'm waiting for the producer to confirm that we only have a minute left on the show. So if you, we just kept talking because you're the best guest ever. Give us a chance, give us a really quick plug as to where, if you want to hear the best guest turn host, where fans can hear you, because you've got your own podcast with Julie Stewart-Banks.
It is called The Energy Line with Nate and JSB. It's through the NHL and iHeartRadio. You can listen on any streaming platform, wherever you get your podcast. And come give it a listen. We have some good guests, and you can hear me and Julie just talk about whatever.
Talk about whatever.
So,
hey, and if you ever need,
which is usually hockey.
I'm free.
It's usually
free anytime. It's usually hockey. Okay. Yeah. and you're on the Empty Netters pod. For those fans who love hockey, like those guys, they're so much fun. And these are now, I believe, your personal friends too.
They are my buddies, Chris and Dan, great guys. They do a great job with the Empty Netters podcast. I mean, one of the bigger podcasts, definitely, in hockey, and they do a great job selling the game. So shout out to Chris and Dan, who Chris actually is watching my dog right now. So
okay, really,
shout out to babysitter Chris. Yes.
Yeah.
They also have one of the best schedule releases too. So kudos to them, because there was a number of teams that they didn't do well. I think they did a great job with the NHL schedule releases.
They did do a good job.
Nate, sorry, we're kind of all over the place here, but this is live TV, so we get live counts and got to wrap it, unfortunately. Thank you so much for coming on. Guys, we're sending it to break. Kasey and I are going to be back on Wednesday. Nate, we'll have you on again soon.
Thanks for having me.